Thank you so much for joining me, Cheryl Lee, that radio chick. Welcome to the Still Rocking It podcast. We will have news, reviews and interviews with some of our favourite Australian musicians and artists. Today we speak with ARIA Award-winning artist Mark Lizotte, known affectionately as Diesel, about coming to Australia from America at the tender age of 5. And being the youngest of 7 children. He will also share who was instrumental in introducing him to Jimmy Barnes, which led to him meeting Jeff, who he eventually married. We'll also hear about the creative process he went through for a new album, Alone with Blues, recorded solo at Diesel's own Sydney studio during the COVID go-slow. What's Mark Lizotte up to now? Let's find out. I'd like to welcome Mark Lizotte.
Hi, Cheryl Lee.
Mark, thanks for joining us. Also known as Diesel, he's got some spunky new music he's just bringing out, which we'll talk about in a little minute. I just wanted to find out a little bit about your history, Mark. You are an American-born Australian singer, songwriter and musician, and you came to Australia when you were 5.
We did, yeah. I'm the youngest of 7. My mother and father, this was kind of like a very tumultuous time in the US. Any people that know history. I've been watching actually a series that was just giving me a lot of insight. It's called 1971, The Year Music Changed the World. It's an amazing series. There's so many incredible albums that were made that year, but it was just such a tumultuous time in America. And I think my parents might have felt that, even though we were in a small town called Little Compton in Rhode Island, which is one of the smallest states in the US. A bit of a Norman Rockwell kind of painting, like a distinct absence of fast food, which is very unusual. So a tiny little town with a town commons and a clock like the one in Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
Yeah. Potato fields, a lot of large Portuguese families all around us. Incredible wealth across the water, which is Newport, which is where, America's Cup and all that. But the side that we were on was very working class and very farm orientated, very rural. Yeah, we still scratching our heads to think, why did mum and dad uproot us all out of that little Norman Rockwell painting and take us to the other side of the world? But I think, it was the end of the Vietnam War and there was a lot of uncertainty. It was a lot of unrest. My dad had been in the Navy. My mum was a nurse and they just felt a bit restless. And I think, the daunting prospect of trying to maybe put 6 kids all through college or something. My older sister was already in nurses training. So I think they just thought, you know what, let's make a run for it now, because if we don't do it now, we never will. You know what I mean?
So they brought you on an adventure to Australia.
I did. And, teenage siblings, my older siblings, I guess in retrospect, there's nothing worse than you can do is to uproot a teenager. At that time, it's not what a teenager wants. It's like a new set of friends and they've all got boyfriends and girlfriends and whatever. So it was hard, yeah. But, we embraced the Australian life really quickly. We came to Sydney and my dad quickly made the decision that Sydney was too expensive.
Still is.
Yeah, exactly. My mum had made little notes on like places that she thought would be nice, like Northern Beaches, Newport, the beaches and all that. And I think my dad drove up there and just said, no, this isn't going to happen. And so bought a secondhand Holden station wagon and drove down the Hume Highway and we ended up in Albury.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which I think was great because we started experiencing on the weekends, especially we'd go out, start kicking around the bush, seeing kangaroos and big iguanas and emus and things. So we got a sense of the inland of Australia, the real bush. And that was great. But, after 3 years, I think we spent there, my mum and dad were like, okay, we need to be next to the ocean again because they always grew up and lived near the ocean. So instead of just going, towards Victoria coastline or New South Wales coastline, they went, oh, let's go to WA. It's very much our dad is kind of like thinks in big sort of thoughts like that. Again, I don't regret my mum and dad doing that. Getting to know WA was an amazing thing. And that's where I started, my music career basically.
WA was where Mark Lizotte's career really did start. In 1981, his first high school band, Dark Spot, won the Battle of the Band competition in Fremantle. And it was well regarded that Diesel's lead guitar guitar talent stole the show and won first prize for the band. He also then played with The Kind, which included sisters Denise and Susie DiMarchi, played with Close Action and Innocent Bystanders before forming Johnny Diesel and the Injectors in 1986. Let's have one of their songs now from their self-titled album, Don't Need Love.
In between that, we moved back to America.
Yeah.
A smaller family, or a nuclear family at that point, just the bottom tier of the family, because the bigger ones had split by then. My dad, in his typical way, was like, no, we're not moving back to where we came from. It was not after living in Australia with not having to shovel snow. I don't think he ever wanted us to shovel snow ever again. So we moved to Arizona, that was kind of like, well, it's a bit like Australia, but not. That's where I started playing cello. So that was a good thing. It was my first proper serious instrument at the age of 8. And my school, public school there at the time, had a music program and it just happened to have cello. So my sister was going to the Victorian College of the Arts in Melbourne at the time and sharing a room with a cellist, and sent me a cassette of this cello playing by her roomie. And it really, sounded beautiful. And so that was inspiring for me. And I got encouraged into doing it. And I wholeheartedly and embrace that.
Been bigger than you at that stage, was it?
It was. I really just wanted a guitar though, all along, but it wasn't just that simple. I couldn't just go, I want a guitar, give me a guitar. So eventually my brother and sister, they put together some of their part-time job money and they bought me a guitar. And that was around the age of 13, 14.
Bless them.
Yeah. I think it was my 14th Christmas. That was my Christmas present. I remember opening it about 5 times before Christmas Day, and I kept sticking it back together. I just could not help myself. I saw the triangular shaped box and I was like, I think I know what it is. It's not an ironing board.
We are really glad that Mark's siblings got together and bought him that guitar. Let's have a quick song, Tip of My Tongue, included on Mark's debut solo album, Hip Fidelity, in 1992. Back with Mark straight after this, and we're going to hear how we first met Jimmy Barnes, which then led to him falling in love with his beautiful wife, Jet. So you knew really from a pretty young age that there was sort of no plan B for you. Music was going to be your future.
I saw my dad do gigs. I saw him rehearse with his bands, various bands that he would join as we moved around. I saw how happy it made him, The time in Arizona, I think he was miserable, not just because he was unemployed the whole time, but because he just couldn't find anyone to play with. That'll go down as the most depressed period for my dad. And, I saw my older brothers and sisters starting up little bands. And so it just seemed natural to me. Music was, always happening in my house.
You weren't the only one to follow Dad sort of into the family business of music.
There's a few of us. My brother has an amazing venue. Him and his wife, Jo, run this venue in Newcastle called Lizotte's, which is a beautiful theatre. Brian is a trombonist and he plays now more than ever because, people like Joe Camilleri, for instance, he has quite a bit of trombone in some of his songs. So he invites Brian up to play. I get him up, of course. He gets up with a lot of people and it's kind of like the house guy. It's like, hey, I'm the host of the venue and I'm going to get up and play trombone with you as well. It's a pretty ideal thing. It's very natural for us. And I've been lucky to do some projects through the years with my brothers and my dad. It eventually all happened. Unfortunately, my mother had already passed by that point, but we made a beautiful blues record called Project Blues, Saturday Suffering Fools in 2011. I got my brothers, Michael and Brian, and my dad to be the horn section on that. So that was a real family affair. It was great.
I first came to see you, Mark, when you started playing for Barnsley. And because being an Adelaide girl, I have to be a Chisel fan. I remember seeing you so young. Of course, that's where you met your beautiful wife as well. And I'm such a romantic. Tell us about how you met her.
I just come to Sydney and I was sleeping on Brent Eccles' couch. Brent was playing drums in the Angels at the time, and he kind of saw us play in Perth. A lot of people had seen us play in this little bar in Perth, and some potential managers, some really great managers, I have to say, expressed interest, and a couple of even came over to my house because I'd moved back in with my mum and dad at that point because I was pretty broke. And they'd come over on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, or whatever. They'd want to meet my dad, and because I was like 18, 19, so they'd do the right thing. And then it would sort of fizzle out, or they'd go back to their lives or the other side of the country or the other part of the world for that matter. I had people all over the world approaching me at that point. But Brent was like the first person to actually put his, money where his mouth is, as they say. And he kept calling after he left Perth. Perth has that tyranny of distance. It's like people say things, they're going to do things and everything, and then they get back to the other side of the country or the other side of the world or whatever, and the time difference or whatever, and enough sort of kind of distance to kind of make a bit of a gap. But Brent really kept his interest up. We started talking like once a week for about 3 or 4 months. He'd say, what's happening? Have you written any more songs and blah, blah, blah. And I'd send him demos or whatever. And he just started getting more and more and more involved. And in the end, he just said, okay, I'm going to help you guys come across the Nullarbor. It was all very hypothetical. I'm not signing anything with you guys yet or anything. Just get your butts over here. I'll book some gigs. And that happened. We were doing 9 shows in a 7-day week, so figure that out for the first few months. But like literally after 48 hours after arriving on Brent's couch, because we were all like put on different people's couches when we arrived, Brent said, hey, and he gave me no warning to this. I'm not sure he even knew that he was going to go in the studio himself, but he said, look, I'm doing some drums today with Jimmy Barnes for his solo album that he's finishing here in Australia. Freight Train Heart ended up being the album. And I've asked Jimmy if I can bring you in, because I said, I've got a guitar player sleeping on my couch, And Jimmy said, yeah, bring him in. Yeah, sure. By all means. I'm like, okay, wow. I'm going into Rhinoceros Studios in Sydney. And ironically, it was in the same street where the bus had arrived about 3 days before that, a bus that came into town from across the desert. I'm like, wow, everything happens in this street. I get jumped off the bus. I meet Jimmy Barnes, all in the same street. So yeah, I go upstairs and Jimmy's in the studio. And it's the first time I've seen someone sing in the control room instead of being in like a little booth or whatever and separated. He was in the control room, speakers up really loud, singing into a normal vocal mic that you'd use at a gig, which is like a 58, Shure microphone, industry standard, as they say. And I thought, this is crazy. He's treating it like a gig, like it's just the energy, the vibe was like a gig. And it wasn't like, oh, it's like we're in a control room now or we're in a studio. It's all like very clinical and everything. It was just like, no, make it like a gig, make it really loud, sweaty. and it was about like 11 in the morning and he was just going at it already, like it was 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
I just kind of like folded into it straight away. That's how I met him. I met him like literally walking in as they were like cranking it up. When I say they, it was Rick Brewster, Jim Hilburn, I think was in there playing bass that day, and Brent. I added my guitar into that. It was a pretty interesting day because that was the kind of the day that a lot of things changed.
Well, let's have a listen to one of those songs now from the Freight Train Heart album that Mark Lizotte plays his guitar on. Back in the 80s, I wore out at least 2 cassettes. How do you pick a favourite? You can't. So let's play 7 Days. Back with more Diesel to find out how he then met his beautiful wife after this.
7 days, 7 more days, she'll be coming.
And then after that, I was doing gigs every night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 gigs on a Saturday. We had Monday off. Brent would have probably said like, oh, come and check him out. He's in a band that I've just brought over across the Nullarbor. And, I guess in Jimmy's book, Jimmy writes it as like Jane discovered me, but it was actually Brent that brought me into the studio because I was sitting on his couch. After that, Jimmy would have been busy, I guess, working in the studio, doing more things that week. So he said out to Jane, I'm guessing, and to Jep, Jane's sister, can you go and check out this guy, this kid? He's playing at the Balmain London Hotel on a Saturday afternoon. And that was the gig I remember they came down. It was a tiny little pub in Balmain where the band would just be set up in the corner underneath the dartboard, No stage, just on the floor. You put your amps wherever you can, sort of thing. Yeah, so we were ripping through our Saturday afternoon gig, and I think it was like next week where we did the Sydney Cove Tavern, and then again they came down. I think Jimmy might have come to that one. I know he came to the Middle Harbour Skiff Club, which was on a Tuesday night. I think that was our Tuesday night gig. Anyway, a few gigs followed, and I met Jet because she was doing the wardrobe on a video clip that Jimmy was shooting for Too Much Ain't Enough Love, which I played the rhythm guitar on in the studio. And that's where I kind of started getting to know her. And then my brother came back from being overseas and he met Jep and they started talking food and they started a catering business, like kind of on the spot. I've got my brother to thank a lot for kind of bringing her into the fold. Yeah, I think my brother got to know Jep like more than I did. to start with, because they were working together as a catering company. So one of the first catering companies to work in the music industry. Before that, there wasn't really a proper catering company yet in this country that did the music industry and, concerts and recording studio budgets and stuff like that.
The way to a man's heart is through his stomach.
Well, food is a big part of this family. That's all I can say. If you know this family, you'll know that food it's a celebratory thing. We put a lot of effort and a lot of thought and a lot of passion, just like music, I guess.
Back to you, Mark. The album, Diesel, Alone with Blues. Is this the bluesiest of them all?
I don't know. I think the thing I did with Chris Wilson was, I think, all the blues titles that I've done have been pretty blues in the sense of I've kept it pretty pure in that sense. But this is definitely the most, solitary in the sense that it's just me doing everything. So there's a kind of a purity, I guess, for want of a better word from that. But I wouldn't be the one to ask if it's bluesier than any of the other ones. The stuff that Chris Wilson did on Short Cool Ones will always stand out as just amazing to me. To be able to say that I've got to make that record with him, I feel very privileged.
So this is a little bit of a tribute in a way to him and also to Michael, who was the one who brought you and Chris together in the first place. Yeah,
I mean, it's been, in the last 2 years, I've had to say goodbye to both of those people, unfortunately, and that's part of life. But yeah, unfortunately, I would have loved to have made another record with Chris, and I would have loved for Michael to have heard this record. That wasn't meant to be. So I'm indebted to the memory and the inspiration that I got from both of those men.
On that note, I think it's time for a song. How about the first track off that album, Short Cool Ones, I Can't Stand the Rain. You're still rocking it with Cheryl Lee, that radio chick. We'll be back with more Diesel straight after this.
I can't stand the rain against my window.
Like you said, it was a pretty solitary trip, wasn't it? Because you played everything. You sang, you guitar, you did the bass, the drums, the percussion, the keyboards, and everything.
At first, it was a little bit, it's not that unusual to make modern music, I guess, in that fashion, brick by brick. But when I think of blues music, I think of a bunch of people in a room just kind of feeling something together and boom, capture it, But this was kind of that same sort of feeling, but done in layers from myself. So I just kept thinking, is this okay? And I thought, you know what? Stevie Wonder made a pile of records this way. And they weren't blues records per se, but they were soul, bluesy, funk. Willie Dixon says the blues are the roots, everything else are the fruits, and it's true. So, I just had to keep reminding myself, it's okay. Stevie Wonders did that. As long as I just keep telling myself that it's not weird. It is what it is. And if you listen to it and you feel something, that's all that matters. It just was a strange process. I guess usually there's somebody around. I couldn't just call up and say, hey, come on over and can we do this? I've got some ideas, blah, blah, blah. That wasn't going to happen because I wasn't allowed to have anybody in my house at that point. So
you should be really, really proud of it. Had another listen again this morning and I really love it. My favourite is the guitar one. How can you go wrong with a man singing about the love for his 6-string guitar? That'd be probably my favourite.
Yeah. Well, Ross Wilson. I just love the imagery that he comes up with when he's writing lyrics like that. And we wrote that 30 years ago. So it's amazing that it came up in a storage tub when he was moving house at the exact time I started making this record. So it was really meant to be. Yeah.
Back with more Mark Lizotte after this, but let's hear 6 Steel Strings now, written by Ross Wilson and on the new Alone with Blues album.
6 steel strings, 6 steel strings.
Apart from the obvious, we know that you've listened to Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker and Sam Cooke especially are your, what's the word I'm looking for, Mark? Who else do you listen to?
Gurus?
Yeah, gurus.
Look, I'm always discovering, the last few years I've discovered someone like Lightning Hopkins, for instance, or R.L. Burnside. There's so many, or Junior Kimbrough. Those are all relatively newer artists that I've discovered. Anything on the Fat Possum label, basically, I have to add. The Fat Possum label just has a lot of really great stuff. Yeah, it's such a big universe of blues artists, and I'm always interested to hear the lesser known ones, especially too, but let's face it, when it comes to some of the most iconic songs, Willie Dixon, he's just mind blowing. We have a bass player. I'm sure he played other instruments too, but big stand-up bass player who was like the humble kind of quiet giant and just wrote so many songs that you have no idea, that one as well. So many tracks embedded in people's minds. And I discovered that when we did the Short Cool Ones record, because Chris and I just went out at like a bull in a china shop and just like a kid in a candy store, just picking everything. And then afterwards we were like, okay, what have we picked here? Who are the writers on these songs? And it was like, what? Willie Dixon has written about 80% of this record. It's crazy, but he was just such a prolific writer, a quiet achiever.
I'm very interested to hear some Willie Dixon. This is Crazy for My Baby from the Journey into the Blues album from 1955. One of Mark Lizotte's big inspirations. You're back with Cheryl Lee, that radio chick. We're having a chat to Mark Lizotte. He has a new album out, Alone with Blues. With the album is a new tour, mainly for New South Wales. I'm hoping that you're going to add an Adelaide date there.
So absolutely. The
tour that you've just done first, the Red Hot Summer Tour, always a fabulous lineup.
Oh, it was great. I mean, it's such a beautiful way to come back into the fold. Last year I did so few shows. By, I guess, October, November, a few little things opened up. And then earlier this year, to do the Red Hot Summer was just like pinch me, it was pinch me. Am I dreaming? Because, suddenly we're outdoors. It's like 10,000 people done in a COVID safe, fashion and all that. I'm getting to see more than anything was just being able to sort of see faces like, Vicar and Linda and Chris Chaney and John Stevens and Jimmy, of course. I saw a few times last year, of course, but we were all like in separate houses and separate parts of New South Wales. So it was a real reunion of music and just of faces and family. It was beautiful. It was great to play with my band too. And we brought Bernie down from Darwin, Bernie Bremond from the Injectors. He came down and we did this re-injected tour, which was just a cool way of sort of getting back to that sound of that first album with Bernie. He was such a big part of that, like a massive part. It was fun. It was really a lot of fun. The weather was just, that's always a plus too when you're doing outdoor shows, when the weather's just that perfect, agreeable temperature. But if it would have been 48 degrees, I still would have been had a smile from ear to ear because it's just so good to play.
When we, as the punters, were able to get out there and see you guys performing live music for us again, it made us appreciate it all so much better. And one thing I noticed was that the performers like yourself were just so joyous to be out there playing for us again.
Yeah, I mean, I get hyped about playing anyway. But like
next level
of just, I have to kind of use an analogy of like being a teenager again through last year especially and now again as well. I just have to think like, okay, I remember when I was like 12 and 13 and I just wanted to play in gigs so much in situ, so bad. And I just had to be really patient and go, time hasn't come yet. Stay in your bedroom, keep working on it. But I mean, I couldn't wait too long. By the age of like 14 and a half, I was out doing gigs in pubs, But a bit like that again, I'm just like dying to do it, but I just have to be patient. So I have to use that kind of put that, early teenage brain into myself again, because otherwise I'll go batty. I'll lose my mind. I really will, because I have to relate to it in some way. And so prolonging gratification or whatever you want to say, that's how I've got to look at it. Just, hang in there.
Well, that's right. Hang in there. And the tour for the album starts in Canberra and it goes all through New South Wales.
We've moved most of them into next year now, which is great. Great that we were able to do that, pick it up like a piece of furniture. An inconvenience, I'm sure, for some and for me. But the postponing thing is I've learned it's not the worst thing. Like I did a lot of shows last year that were literally from the year before. And it's like, hey, here I am a year later, but and it just makes it even taste even sweeter, It's a
little bit part of our life now.
Like I never cancel, I postpone and I will keep trying and trying until I will get there, and like I'm not going to just give up and go too hard. My agent, thankfully, they don't have that defeatist attitude either. They're tenacious and they're fierce and tenacious. That's all I can say.
And it's going to be like unwrapping the guitar and unwrapping it, wrapping it up again until you can take it out of the box.
Without the smell of like extruded plastic. Yeah, so that's always the smell of Christmas. I'll never forget the smell of plastics.
Now, if people wanted to keep track of when and where the rescheduled tour dates are, they go to dieselmusic.com.au or the Facebook page.
Yeah, Facebook page, dieselmusic.com.au will take you to all of my platforms, take you to the merch, take you to Facebook, take you anywhere you want to go. It's always a good place to start.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're just as excited to see you back out on the road again. In the meantime, everybody, grab the album Diesel, Alone with Blues. You'll love it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, and I'm loving the clear vinyl, by the way. I picked clear and I thought, is clear boring?
No.
I could do a color, but now I've seen it, I'm like so glad I picked it. It's beautiful. So get some of that vinyl, guys.
Nothing like vinyl.
It sounds best. It really does. Especially this album just really needs to be played on vinyl.
I really appreciate it, and we shall see you down the front. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
You take care. Bye.
You're with Cheryl Lee, that radio chick. Thank you so much for joining me on the Still Rocking It podcast. Hope to catch you again next time. Get out when you can, support Aussie music, and I'll see you down the front.